with the good website, so Jordan did our website is as well, and I'll ask Mike. I'll put him on the spot, but he'll know what I'm talking about. Mike, I'm a prospect. You're on the phone with me, and I say, Mike, I'm interested in training, but
Is this, do we put it in this one or this one?
Either or, whatever's better for you.
Okay. We can put it in this top one, that's fine.
A wire's a wire.
It is. Are you wearing a wire?
You're wearing a wire.
You're a narc.
We got like 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
Yeah.
2 minutes.
2 minutes and 12 seconds.
Well, my cameraman better get out of the bathroom.
I know, man. Say, come on, dude.
Drag him out of
Pinch it off, man. Pinch it off.
Get out of here, man. Good luck on the rest of the Lipsy school.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're, whoops.
And your upcoming travels.
When are they?
I said, and good luck on your
Oh,
upcoming
thank you.
travels. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I got DC next week and then off to exotic lands. India in the summer. It's a good time. Yeah, they say it's the most beautiful time. You only sweat 23 and a half hours a day.
You're not going, are you going? Going back to
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was a joy.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a good discussion. Appreciate it. Be safe, have a good time, and you know, I've been there before.
Maybe Dad probably got the message.
What did George say their marketing services was? It $90 an hour or $30 an hour? $30 an hour. Okay.
But
Yeah.
the package is 30 hours.
And then it's $900 a month.
Okay.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
that's what they're there for.
Mike, I would like to know, pick your brain, like, so I do a lot of my cold calling in person, like, so the way I've been cold calling, like door knocking, still do it, man, and I get success there too, like,
I said I'd be talking when the timer went off. All right. Time to rock and roll, everybody. This is going to be what I would like for you to do from here to the end is I'd like you to craft a version of your own plan. This, what I've entitled Your Next 90 Days, is part of in my one-on-one coaching practice. I'm going to show you a version, albeit somewhat abbreviated, but of how we right-size goals and implement a plan to make them work. Now the key is, and this is where I want to start, with a couple of your own personal baselines. So you're going to create some numbers for yourself, and they're going to be personal to you. But the first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to goal setting is never forget this number. Anybody know what this number represents?
limited time,
Well, Jordan is correct. It's correct.
the most precious commodity.
It is. The older you get, the more you realize that. 168 is the number of hours in a week. And the reason I focus on that is because brokerage is not really a 9 to 5, 5-day-a-week thing, but most of you probably want to have a life outside of work as well. You might have a family, you might have hobbies. There's no secret pool of time, right? I remember years ago I had gone on a good diet. I gotten in pretty good shape, and one of my brokers came up to me and said, "How'd you do it? When did you find time to work out? Tim, I know you got a big family. When did you find time to work out?" I said, pick the hour that sucks the least. Like you realize I haven't discovered an hour during the day that you don't know about, right? It's all the same 168 hours. It's the great equalizer. So what I would like each of you to do is I want you to think about how much money you want to make in the next 12 months. Could be what you've made historically. If you're new, maybe it's a guesstimate of what you want to make in the next 12 months. Now, if you're not already making a lot of money, don't put $1 million, okay? We need it to be, if you need to make $1 million your first year in the business, go buy a lottery ticket, okay? Probably won't happen there, but it's still a chance. Now, I want you to take that number and I want you to divide it by 2,000.
Is this net or gross?
It can be whatever you want it to be. I find that the most effective is net, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. Why this number is important and why I use 2,000 as the denominator, because I've had any number of brokers come back and say, Rios, I tell you right now, I don't work 40 hours a week. I work way more than that. Fine. But you and I both know that there's only certain hours of the day when it's socially acceptable to make calls and go on meetings. And that's prime time. This is the value of your prime time hour. How many of you have a number right now that is north of, let's say, $50 an hour? We're all south of $50 an hour? Okay, all right. we got to go back to square one here. How many of you, in the value of your primetime hour, when you did this math for yourself, are north of $50 an hour?
Have they all done the math?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, those who've done the math, you're above that. Now, brokers are a really unique and funny breed, I find, because I had the opportunity, in addition to being a broker, of managing offices as well. At one point, I had 125 people under my license, and it's a really interesting thing because a broker is the type of personality that will show up in the bespoke Italian suit and the German sedan and the $500 Ferragamo loafers and the Rolex, but doesn't want to pay for a mailer. Right? Doesn't want to, oh, no, I can't. Or you get Jordan stands up here and says, we got a subscription, $30 an hour, $900 a month. Oh, $30 an hour, that's a lot. None of you are even at that number. Let me tell you something about time and what you do. All of us, and some of you might have assets and things like that, we work for a living. What does that mean? Anybody, in my mind, who monetizes their time works for a living. If you go out fishing and one of the people in your boat is the highest priced attorney in your town. Caroline, what's the highest priced attorney in your town charge per hour? $2,000 an hour maybe? Maybe $2,000 an hour? Okay, I mean, that's a lot of money, right? And the other person you've invited out owns 4 apartment buildings, an office park, and a warehouse. While you're out fishing, who's still making money? Right. The lawyer, though they make $2,000 an hour, is not making money. That, to me, it's not how much money you make. It's if you monetize your time, you work for a living. So if you want to progress in this business, you have to start looking at it. If you can pay somebody less to do something than your prime time hour is worth, eventually you need to offload that. Invest in yourself, invest in your business, because those 168 hours are all you have. You will never find one more minute in a week than that. I also want you to think about that when we get into the goal setting and the goal planning, because I'm not here to tell you exactly how to use your prime time hour. I have clients who work out at 11 a.m. or 12 during the day or in the afternoon. That is their choice. But I need you to be aware of what that hour is worth. So if you're going to invest that hour, make sure you're getting a return from it. And returns aren't always monetary. Sometimes they're personal. When we start setting goals, there's 5 principles that guide me in my thought process. The first one is what I call goal-specific prioritization. Now that sounds like a fancy phrase. The message that I'm trying to get across from that is, in brokerage, and let's see how many of this sounds familiar to how many of you. How often in your brokerage life does a day feel like a battlefield triage, where you're just running from one fire to another, and and this tenant, and that red line, and this lawyer's doing this, and my manager wants to talk, and my team member called in sick. There is a certain amount of chaos that is inherent in this business, and you're not going to get rid of it. Which means when you think about goal planning, you have to make a strong conscious effort into doing things that are strategically important, but they're not urgent. Nathan, if you get back in the office on Monday and you're scheduled to make a bunch of phone calls and you don't make them, what happens to you that night?
I'm uncomfortable, weight on my shoulders, and I didn't do what I was supposed to do.
Okay, so that's pretty good. I mean, you feel a little bit of guilt. Let me ask you: will you still have food on your table for dinner?
Sure. Yeah.
Will you still have a roof over your head?
Yes.
Is your family still going to love you?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I'm glad those were all yeses. Okay. Human beings are not particularly well wired for long-term consequences. We are wired for the short term. It was only 100 years ago in this country when the average life expectancy of an adult male crested 50 years. So 200 years ago, nobody was thinking, I hope I have enough money in my 401k for my lengthy retirement. It's like, no, I hope I live to 30. So we're not really wired to think about the long term, which is why you've got to, we'll talk about this as we get even deeper into the topic, which is why you've got to take the time to think, what are the top things I can do to move my business forward? Now, realistically, some of these are going to be short-term goals. Got to get the marketing package out for this deal. Need to review the red line on this lease. Those are not only important, but they're also urgent. But you have to reserve time for things that are important but not urgent. You also want to think about, can it be delegated, not only to somebody who's existing on your team, but could you outsource it to somebody who you pay less than what your primetime hour is worth? Now, that last question that I ask myself when I'm goal planning in the week is, does it need to be done at a specific date, but more importantly, a specific time? If you're going to pick up the phone and you're trying to get a prospect on the phone, when do you have to call them usually? Okay, well, for some product types, it's in the evening. I know people that work small multifamily, evening was always a great time to get people. But whatever your product type is, there is a window when you can make calls. Who do you need around if you're data mining on CoStar and searching Zoom info? You need anybody but you? You just need a good internet connection. So if you're a night owl and you're up at 2 in the morning, you can do that because it doesn't require anybody else's involvement. One of the biggest mistakes people make in how they allocate their time is by doing the right thing at the wrong time. I'm researching my, doing my initial research for my call list at 10:30 a.m. in the morning. You are wasting a window where money-making activities can only be done during that, and you're doing something that could be done any hour you had available. So, yes, weekend, like for example, for me, Sunday morning, I've got adult children, but I've got young children as well. Nobody's 7 a.m. on Sunday morning, nobody's up but me. So it's a great time. This is why when I think of the 168 hours, what's great for me is like my little sister, wonderful person, has always had 40-hour week, 9-to-5 jobs. If she's grumpy, if she's at work at 5:01 p.m., right? For me, I don't care. It goes where it goes. If it's on Sunday, it's a Saturday. I'm not a workaholic. I feel like I have pretty good balance in life. But yeah, absolutely. You've got to look for times that doesn't affect all the other things that you're trying to do. And that's really where it comes down to the time of day scheduling. Do the right things at the right time. One thing that we really have to be worried about, please don't ever confuse being busy with being productive. They are not synonyms. They can be the same, but they aren't necessarily. Being busy is generally not a problem. Being productive, doing things that are meaningfully moving your business forward, that's a different deal. That's a different skill set. Sustainable planning. So I want each of you to think, and I'm going to ask a couple of you what your number is. I want you to think of a typical 3 to 4 week stretch in your business. During your primetime hours, whatever that is, 9 to 5, 8 to 6, I don't care. What percentage of your time is taken up by surprises? And the way I would define a surprise is if you were planning on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, you didn't know it was going to happen. Okay? So think about that for a few seconds. Adrian, what amount of time do you think is taken up by surprises in your prime time schedule?
On the weekend, not really.
How about Monday through Friday? And like a regular work day, how many surprises hit you?
Maybe like a few times a week.
Okay, and would you think that's 10% of your time, 15% of your time?
Maybe like 10%.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty low. How many of you think that you're 25 to 35? Okay, I can almost guess your tenure and your position in this business by what number you give me. Anybody who gives me a number 20 or south is usually relatively new in the business. I don't know if that's the case with you, Adrian, but what happens then is as you become an established broker, it goes to 25 or 35, and then the hardest job in this business to apportion your time properly is player coach. Somebody who's still responsible for production but also has managerial responsibilities, they can top 40, 50%. Whatever your number is, the point is you have to not try to eliminate the triage. You got to dance with it. Because you're not going to be able to stop that tenant that you've been chasing for 6 months who calls you and says, hey, we're free Wednesday morning. We'd like for you to line up some tours and we want to go see some spaces. Well, I'm sorry, but on Friday I didn't plan for that, so I'm going to say no. How many of you are going to say no to that? I know you're not going to say no to it, and you shouldn't say no to it. But you've got to plan for it. Where most people fall down in their goals is two-dimensionally, they grossly overestimate what they can do in the short term. I'm going to make up 250 calls this week. Really? Because if you didn't make 200 the week before, you aren't making 250 this week. You're just not, right? So, but we get so excited in the process of goal planning, and that's one of the things that I find I have to do a lot when I work with people is temper your short-term expectations a little bit. It's not a recipe for underperformance. It's a lesson in reality. What can I really do in this period of time? Okay. A couple of ways that we look at this. So I just talked about the shock absorption, but I want to talk a little bit about capacity versus motivation. When my son Logan was 9 years old, I came home from work one day and I had given him something to do. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I asked if he'd gotten it done, and he said, no, Dad, I can't do it. Now, my boys learned pretty early on with me that I can't is a trigger phrase for Dad. Because I'm not an idiot. I didn't ask you to re-roof the house while I was gone. You're 9. Okay, I gave you something that a 9-year-old is perfectly capable of doing. So I said, Logan, let me ask you a question. If I give you $100, can you get this done right now? And his little 9-year-old eyes lit up. Yeah, I can. I get $100. I said, no, I just wanted to distinguish between capacity and motivation. You could do this, you just don't want to. And it might be databasing, it might be cold calling, it might be that uncomfortable conversation you need to have with the attorney representing the landlord who just sent you back more red lines than you can shake a stick at. I don't know. But is it that you can't do it or that you don't want to do it? And be aware of that when we're planning as well. It's okay to be fixed on the outcome and flexible on the approach. So if you said that you were going to add 15 full contact records to your database right now, and you think you're going to be able to do that early Tuesday morning and late day on Friday, but something comes up, you grab that block on your calendar and you put it somewhere else. Don't let your goals get behind you. As soon as they get behind you chronologically, they have a much higher rate of slippage. So keep them in front of you so you've always got that accountability. I love my 30-minute planning session. And this is an abbreviated version of my time management stuff, but I wanted to have it as a baseline before we get into the planning. The 30-minute planning session for me is one of those best practices that has dramatically improved the quality of my life. I typically do mine late Friday afternoons because by Sunday night I'm getting emails again from coaching clients and things, and so things are starting to heat up. Friday afternoon, nobody wants to talk business. So I got some quiet time and I asked myself some questions. What did I say I was going to do last week? What did I actually get done? And if I didn't get it done, why didn't I get it done? Now, this is going to sound like fancy word play, but I always ask myself, is that problem transient or systemic? A transient problem is something that happened. It was an anomaly. You know, I had a coaching client one time that said, oh, we spent all night in the emergency room with my wife. That's a transient problem. Hopefully she doesn't go to the emergency room every week. Okay? A systemic problem is something that's constantly getting in the way. You're doing so much admin work or that you're never getting around to the call blocks. What you want to be really careful of is what I lovingly refer to as a transient systemic problem. You always have an excuse. It's not the same one every week, but you always have an excuse for why you're not doing what you said you were going to do. And that one's particularly insidious. Then I want to think about what are the things that I can do, saving at least one of my main goals for the week for something that's important but not urgent. And here's the way I ask myself that question. What am I not doing right now that's going to have repercussions in 6 to 12 months? That's the point I was making with Nathan. He says, yeah, well, I'm still going to have dinner. My family's still love me. I'm still having a place to sleep. But he's creating a problem for himself down the road. Now, luckily, you're aware of that. But it's really easy to disconnect from that consequence when it comes to doing those things that don't. We love, as human beings, we love cause and effect. Sometimes we see cause and effect where it doesn't even exist. I wrote a good paper. I got an A. I spent a long time in the kitchen and I've made this beautiful meal. We love this boom, boom, boom. I had a gentleman in Wisconsin I've coached for a couple years, and when he first came to me, he was in a slump. I got to get out of this slump. And I told him, this slump will last as long as whatever you created in the past. I can't undo that. The problem in brokerage is slumps are created in the past. And whatever you did, however long you took your eye off the ball, is how long this slump's going to last. What you can do here is you can double down on the right activities and prevent it from happening in the future, but you can't undo this. And it's that differential, it's that separation in cause and effect that gives us massive heartache 6, 12, 18, 24 months down the road when we're not where we should be or could have been. Make sense? Okay. One thing, Mike talked about this in a little bit. He didn't get as deep into his cold call routine as I would have loved to have seen because there's some real great stuff in there. In sports, there's a concept called the body becomes its function. Describe to me what the body of a world-class marathoner looks like. Thin, lanky, limber. How big are their biceps? Right. You could fit 10 of their arms inside Abraham's. Come on, Abraham, give us tickets to the gun show. No, I'm just kidding. He's going to put his jacket on. You should be proud of that. So even somebody who's running world-class marathons knows that even 5 extra pounds of muscle is that much more they've got to carry for 26.2 miles. What did Usain Bolt look like?
Very muscular. He's cut.
I mean, was he or was he not like the Dodge Hellcat? Yeah. Right? I might get 7 miles to the gallon, but I'm going to beat you down the drag strip. Okay? Because the body becomes its function. And sprinting, he was a sprinter, by the way, for those of you who might not be familiar with Usain Bolt.
Fastest man in the world.
Yeah, fastest man in the world, because it's all about horsepower. Who cares about gas mileage? I just got to get 100 meters down the track as fast as I possibly can. The same thing is true in business. I have bad news. My wife and I have this argument all the time because she swears I'm wrong, but she knows I'm not. Multitasking is a myth. Okay? What people mistake for multitasking is one of two things, and pardon my language. It's either half-assing everything you're doing, or it's rapid cycling between sequential tasks. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, but you're never doing two things at once. Anything that you're doing simultaneously is coming from a different part of your brain. But the human portion of your brain, it's not doing two things at once. So, like calls, for example, you got to have a way, if your database, you're making calls, that you block out those distractions. I know, and this is going to sound somewhat contrary to what Mike was talking about earlier about being 911 for your clients. But here's the problem. I can tell you right now, I know that when Mike's in the middle of a 4-hour program, he's not going to check until the break. That's why Jennifer's monitoring his email, because if there really is a 911, that's why one of the reasons why we share emails, which he's going to get into later. But that doesn't mean he takes it away from that client. It's just got to come from somewhere else. So we cover it differently. It's not about constantly pulling out the phone. And how many of you, it's time for a little honesty, how many of you have ever felt your phone vibrate and it's not even in your pocket, but you still felt it? Yeah, I've had the phantom buzz, right? We're so attuned to that we can't let, so my phone is here, so I'm using it to keep track of time, but it's on Do Not Disturb, so the screen's not even lighting up, nothing. I have 3 kids in a hotel room right now, and for all I know, the hotel's burned down. And I don't know, because I'm here with you and I'm on Do Not Disturb. So here's the reality. We're not as important as we think we are. There are very few problems in this business that can't wait 2 hours. True story, years ago, investment people, my brothers and sisters, we don't go to closings, right? Don't go to your closings if you're an investment person. It's the only thing that's going to happen to you in a closing is you're going to get less fee, okay? That's the only thing that happens to investment folks when they go to closings, okay? This isn't New York in the 50s. We don't have to sit around and close it around a conference table. So I'm away, and I happen to be somewhere where I didn't have cell service, and I don't recall why. When I got back, I had a closing that morning. When I got back into range, a slew of voicemails pops up on my phone. The first one, Tim, this is Dwayne over at Chicago Title. We are really struggling. I don't think this deal's going to close. The parties are ready to walk. Give me a call as soon as you can. Next call, Tim, where are you? This deal's really on life support. Would love to hear from you as soon as we can. Tim, Dwayne, we're working on some solutions. We might have a path forward, but call me as soon as you can. And long story short, by the end it was, hey Tim, we're closed, we're recorded, everything worked out okay. You should see the funds within 72 hours.
Had you answered your phone?
I probably would have screwed it up. What's it going to take, David? How much of my fee do I need to give you? So it was a great example to me that I didn't have to be Johnny on the spot there to solve everybody's problem the moment it happened. Especially because when you do that, you are mortgaging your future. When you take that time away from things that are strategically important to your business, it's, I don't know if you had any Marvel fans in here. This is a Doctor Strange, right? The bill always comes due. It will. It just comes from the future. One of my best friends, his oldest son, who's a smart kid, he's a good kid, but he's really, really snarky. And he'd say, Dallin, I think you need to probably be studying for that big test you got on Monday. And he'd say, Dad, that's future Dallin's problem. Present Dallin is enjoying Xbox right now. You know, at least Dallin was honest about that's future Dallin's problem. How often are we doing that, making it future us problem? And it doesn't need to be, okay? It always comes from somewhere. Now, the last thing, which I'm going to just get through this really quickly, is how do we habitualize things? But I'm going to get that in the next one. So I want to take you a little bit through a planning process. I'm going to use closing an income gap as an example, but the concepts can be applied to a variety of different things. Building your database, training a team member, there's all sorts of ways that we can use this process. The first thing that I would like each of you to do is to set, well, provided you want to do an income example with me. That 12-month number that you wrote down earlier, is that the number you want to shoot for in the next 12 months? I just need you to lock that number in. Okay. When it comes down to the target. The target has to be realistic. If you're brand new in the business and you made 20 grand last year, if you don't have a reasonable pipeline into a lot of dough, don't put 750 as your goal. You know, make it, it's okay. Remember, my mentor used to say that this business really was a marathon and not a sprint. And it really is true. Early on, you need to be focused on doing things the right way, building the right foundation. If you build the proper foundation in this business, the money will take care of itself. But if you're constantly trying to shortcut to the quickest paycheck, that's where you run into problems. So if let's say that somebody says, okay, I want to make $550,000 over the next 12 months. Then we want to focus on 4 areas to assess the current pipeline. What are the current assignments or listings or mandates, depending on what part of the world you're in, do I have? What type of recurring revenue could I expect? And we'll go into each one of these. If I'm mentoring, what can I expect from my junior team members? And what that gives us is the gap that we need to close. So let's start first with assessing your current listings. One mantra to live by in brokerage is it's not about whether something is possible, it's whether it's probable. Everything is possible. Well, there's a buyer out there for this overpriced piece of land that's been marketed for the last 750 days. Yeah, there's a lid for every pot, but is it probable that you're going to cash a check that's also going to be commensurate with the time that you put in? Rachel's a land person. No offense, Rachel, but you know those pieces of land that sit there and languish forever. Okay? You've got to look at things, and you have to look at them very honestly. What is, depending on your specialty, what's the tenant's financial strength? Does the landlord have money to make capital improvements? How much space is available? If it's an investment deal, is it a really broad buyer pool for this? Or am I looking for that needle in a haystack buyer? These are all things that go into assessing what are the probabilities that this is going to turn into a paycheck. And this is not the time to have your rose-colored broker glasses on. We are, for the most part, this is a stereotype, it doesn't cover everybody, but for the most part, we are an optimistic group. And you have to suspend that a little bit when you do this. You got to be tough and say, do I really have a shot? And anything, in my mind, with a 70% chance or less of closing, being money within the next 12 months, doesn't get counted. And there better be a mitigating reason why it's on my pipeline. Like, for example, inland, to be fair, sometimes it does take a few years for the right buyer to come along. But then I also know I can't apportion that much time to that listing. So I'd like everybody make an estimate based on your current active listings, mandates, purchase contracts. How many dollars out of your overall number are going to come from that? I know that we're not taking as much time, like in coaching, we'll go deal by deal. Obviously, you couldn't do that with 27 people, but. Now, here's the funny thing. Rios, it's got 50% probability and you're having my fee. I'm not going to get 50% of the fee. No, you're not. But when you look at somebody's individual pipeline, let's say you're looking at 10 deals. The challenge is we could come up with a scenario where all of those deals close or don't close. And so what I'm doing with this, and it's remarkably accurate, is we're just saying, all right, here is a pool of $500,000 in commissions. Based on probabilities, in some combination or permutation, I'm going to get $250 out of this. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Okay. You don't have to share it, but who has a number of what they think their pipeline's worth in the next 12 months? You don't have to say it out loud. I just wanted, Jordan's got one. Okay, Nazi, great, awesome. Abraham, Paul, cool. All right. With that number, we move to step 3. Yes, Musa.
Going back to that, like, it's kind of difficult, It's like in 4 months, you might get a listing out of, and that is unexpected.
That's not this category.
What is current?
Yeah.
What is current? And what you can anticipate over the course of a year to get to your number.
So you're absolutely right. There's going to be categories for things that could happen in the future. This is only the stuff we know about right now. And the reason this has to go into goal planning is when I talked about people don't know how to right size their goals, that's what, when we balance transaction management and business development, it usually skews to one side or the other. So the purpose of this exercise is to know how much BD do I need to do to close the gap that I have in the short term, right? If it doesn't do your, if 50 calls a week is going to close your gap, then 250 is not your number, right? It just isn't, because you probably don't have time for it anyway. And I say this to people all the time. I know it's very true for me. Achievement has a psychology, but so does failure. And if you are consistently setting marks for yourself that you don't hit, that becomes habitualized. That becomes ingrained. Non-achievement becomes the standard. I know that sounds goofy, but I've seen it so much for myself too. So it's better, and this is not about sandbagging or not stretching yourself a little bit, but it's about dealing within a band of reality. Okay? The next thing is I want you to think, and Musa, this is part of what might capture what you're talking about. I used to call them my client annuities. I had clients in my book of business that were good for a deal or two every couple years. John, could you think of 4 people off the top of your head right now that you don't know what they're going to buy in the next 2 years, but they're going to buy something? Yeah. Right. So those are John's client annuities. So what he does is he can look down and say, okay, Mike is probably good for $2 million deal. Nazi's probably good for $3 million deal. Houston, probably $750. And he can make some guesses. If I continue to take care of these relationships, what do I think I could get from it? It's a little nebulous, I admit it, but you know you have to put time against those relationships. And since time is finite, you have to account for it going somewhere. Okay. That one's a little trickier, so I'm going to give you a second to think through that one. In the previous, I should have probably mentioned, for some of you, and a coaching client of mine, what he calls it corporate uplift. He gets invited in on a certain amount of national accounts because he's the local boots on the ground. I have another client of mine in South Carolina who is the commercial agent in a good high-end luxury residential brokerage. So all the commercial leads come to him. And so there's a certain amount he's got to account for leads just coming in because that's just what's going to happen. So in that client annuities, you could also put corporate uplift and referrals and things like that. That's kind of a catch-all for that. You know, I don't know what's going to come from this, but I know that XYZ national account's going to pull me in on a couple of deals locally this year. With mentoring, you take your mentees through the exact same process that you've gone through, assessing their pipeline, their activity levels, their deals, what is realistic. I don't count, certainly in the first year, I don't count income for anybody, which by the way, when you are onboarding a new team member, you can't judge people by money early on in this business. You have to judge them by activity. Are they doing bless you, are they doing their database? Are they driving their market? Are they getting the phone number research? Are they making the calls? Are they setting on the meetings? Don't wait 18 months to figure out that somebody wasn't doing that the whole time. Have standards early on for mentoring, because if they can't do that right, nothing good is happening 12 to 18 months from now. You get what I'm saying? So don't wait to figure that out. This is not wishful thinking. What you are left with now is a gap. So in this particular case, we have a 550 target, 209 from current listings, another $150 from client annuities, a little bit from mentoring. So we have a gap of 108,000. That's a closable gap. For somebody who's already making $500,000 a year, that's totally within your control to close that gap, provided, you know, markets go up and down. I understand that, but this allows me then to go back in and do what I call reverse your ratios. Now, Mike talked about this a little bit earlier, but here's where I want you to think through. The first number I want you to think is, what is your average take home for your average deal? 15 grand, 20 grand? The first 7 years of my career, I think my average I knew was 21,000. That was my average deal. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but that was my average take home. Okay. Now, here's the next number. Of the opportunities that go to actual lease proposal or purchase contract, what percentage ultimately close versus fall out? And by the way, if your number's not at least north of 70%, you need more help qualifying your pipeline on the front end. By the time you get to lease proposal or purchase contract, hopefully within a 12-month time frame, you're 80, 90%. But 80 is probably a pretty good number. Yes, sir?
Would you say with the office world the way it is today, that number has changed with COVID and people not knowing what to do? Everything's constantly.
So a couple things have changed in office. Number one that's totally crazy is just lead times for build out. What was taking 4 months to build out is now 9, 10, 11, 12 months. So you always, when you're planning like this, you always have to think, what's my denominator? How many of you are pure tenant rep in here? Okay, so no offense to Jordan and Daniel, they know what they're going to make in 2022. Their year's done. Nobody's going to enter the tenant rep that they're going to bill an invoice, unless it's like some short-term sublease or something like that. They know their year. A tenant rep's year is locked and loaded by second quarter, usually first quarter.
Pretty much all business development, unless you get a few referred deals here and there.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, an investment person, could you find an all-cash deal and a quick close in November and get it done by the end of the year for 1031 purposes? Yes. So you've got to be aware of the gestation period, if you will, of a deal. So in office right now, if you're in office leasing, you don't have a 4 or 5 month build out anymore. You've got to think about what your denominator is. So even if you executed a lease right now and you were going to bill an invoice to commission at rent commencement, it's 2023. So do be aware of that and don't pull things forward when they shouldn't come forward. Now we want to think about, all right, if I have 80% of these close, how many of, when I get engaged exclusive representation on the tenant side or I get an exclusive listing on an investment deal, how many of those are ultimately going to contract or lease? And so on and so forth. You can see, like, now, up until that point, the rules of thumb, like I said, if you're not closing 80% of what you go to lease or purchase contract on, you got a qualification problem on the front end of your pipeline. If you're not converting, call it 70% of the opportunities you're taking on to that LOI or lease proposal stage, then we have to re-engineer your business. Earlier than that, a lot of it depends on how you're playing your game. So the next metric is, how often do you pitch for business and win? Who here has been in the business over 10 years? Okay. All right, so David, how often do you pitch for something and walk away with the opportunity? 25, 50%, 75?
I'd say 50%.
Yeah, and for a 10-plus year vet, that's what I would expect. How many of you are under 5 years? Okay. I wouldn't expect you to be higher than 20 or 25% because you need to be swinging the bat more often. Nobody should be batting 1,000 or 100%. I had a friend one time say, I've never failed to get a job that I've applied for. And I said, then you haven't applied for enough jobs. Because everybody fails. Everybody misses. That's okay. You got to be swinging the bat. The reason why David would have 50% is because David's time now is more valuable. He's got to be pickier about the people he calls, the meetings he goes on, and the pitches he takes. You can also chalk part of it up to track record and reasons why people would want to hire him, but he's got to make those decisions on the front end about how he spends his time. When you're just making calls and you have no listings, you go meet anybody anytime, and you should. because the face time in front of the client is invaluable for you to work out the kinks and get your presentation skills nice and sharp. But at some point, time becomes too valuable and you have to ratchet that down. Yes, Alex.
Should be more picky, selective with your prospects and your appointments. Why? Well, I guess your close rate's going up, 25 to 50.
Yes.
Okay, it's not coming down from 100.
Right. Yeah, no, it's going up. It's going up. Early on, there's a lot of benefit in swinging the bat. Also, early on, if you don't have a mentor by your side all the time, you're just going to miss stuff. There's stuff I missed years ago that I wouldn't miss anymore. But it just comes, there's a certain amount. This is a funny business. So my oldest son's a programmer. And in programming, if I say, oh, I went to the most prestigious computer science school back in the early 90s, that means diddly right now. I mean, it couldn't mean less. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And so the fact that my son is on the forums and hacking and doing all this stuff is what makes him valuable right now. This is an old school business where experience and you can't replace it. You can be knowledgeable in the market pretty quickly, but it's hard to replace that experience. John.
The flip side of what Alex said was, your probability is going up, and you said too, hey, there's things you missed you shouldn't have, but also there's a lot of things you take that you shouldn't have.
Never.
You learn to not hire or even fire clients better the longer you're in, and I delight in firing clients. Not only doesn't slow me down, it slows my competitors down.
Yeah, you learn how to vet people and you know what questions to ask. It becomes a bit,
It's a game.
the more familiarity you have with it, the more you know, the type of person you're dealing with, and you know the questions that you need to ask them. And from there, you could take it from point A to you can go A, B, C relatively quickly and know where you're going with that client. It takes familiarity with what you're doing, and once you get familiar and you're used to, know how to deal with certain people, it becomes a lot more easier to know that this person's not somebody you want to deal with, or this person is absolutely you want to get with them and meet with them again because you have future business with them. You know that you can turn it into an annuity.
100%. And all this comes with time and experience, valuing your time. But the purpose of here is wherever you are in the business, you can figure out what your activity levels need to be. I can tell you right now, because I tracked this for years of my business, 1 out of 7 dials was a conversation for me. I tracked that for years. I've seen on the low end in rural areas where people are friendlier and pick up the phone, I've seen it be 1 out of 3 or 4. And like Mike said, 1 out of 18 earlier. You get somebody who's calling in New York, LA, Atlanta.
Houston's like that, one out of 18 or 1 out of 20.
Yeah. And you have to know what that is for your market. Now, my suspicion is yours isn't that high because you're calling a group of people that you probably have some familiarity with or warmer calls. So as you get deeper into the business, it can get better just because you're kind of hoeing over the same patch of farm that you've been working for years. But when you know what this is, now you know what it takes to close the gap. And what's beautiful about this process is I did this with he's a 25-year veteran of office tenant rep. And we did this, and we get to the bottom line. So I actually have a template that auto-calculates a lot of this when you put in assumptions. And we get to the bottom, and it says, all right, to close your gap, you need to make 326 phone calls a week. I looked at him. So we're on Zoom, and are you going to make 326 phone calls a week? He says, no, there's no way. I said, I knew the answer. I just wanted to hear it come out of your mouth. I said, so what lever are we going to pull? And I said, I didn't want to point this out to you earlier. I said, but let's go back up to step 2. Why are you working? That deal's netting you $900. You've been in this business for 25 years. You need to tell me right now why you took that. Is it future business? Is it a gateway to a larger client? No, it's just a young guy and I felt bad for him. I said, are you running a charity? You're not a 501c3 company. You know, you have to give it to somebody else. He's the sweetest guy. I mean, I consider him a friend too. But I said, look, if you can't put a high value on your time, rest assured nobody else is going to raise your price. Yes, Jordan.
I had a question, you know, because Mike talked this morning about the research and the research, good quality research to where you can warm up that call.
Mm-hmm.
How do you marry that up? I mean, kind of using your rule of thumb, 25 solid research
Uh-huh.
phone calls. How do you back that time up to like put it all together? Backwards clean.
So my call list is 25,
Yes, sir.
but I said calls 1 through 3, 1 through 4 are existing clients.
Right. That's right.
Calls 15, 16, or 17 to 25 are people that I should follow up into extend relationships. So that calls 4 through 12 are the ones that need the research. So that's
Like 12 through 25 need the research.
no. Well, 1 through 3 are existing clients, and I'm
Correct.
just feeling the love to feel positive about myself. Calls 4 through 12 are new clients that I've not done business with. Those are the ones I went to LinkedIn, their Facebook page. Calls 12, maybe 13, 14 through 25 are also existing clients, but I'm just continuing the dialogue. So it's
Okay.
it's 9 of the 25.
But for me, I
are
probably,
research.
for me, it's, I need to get more existing clients. So it could be a larger number where I'm like really having to make 25.
Oh, yeah, because I'm 45 years in the business.
Right.
And so for a new broker,
And I'm
of
trying to
the
reset.
25, you could very well have 20, 21 of the 25, if that was your number.
Yeah, that's what it's gonna
That
be.
needed research.
Yeah.
That's what 7 in the morning till 7:45 is for. That's what 6:30 in the evening to 7:30 in the evening is for. Again, the new group in here is not gonna like this, but Tim's alluded to it. I told you before you would come work for us, I needed 60 hours from you every week. I get in at 7 and I leave at 7. And if you're not there when I'm there and you're gone before me, we were gonna have a prayer meeting on what was going on. And that's just because
Yeah.
there's a wonderful relationship between the top producers and hard work.
Right.
There's very few that skate through this industry. Most of them have put in lots of time. That's just my experience.
Because like I'm spending like Saturdays and Sundays taking my son, putting him in the backseat of the car and driving properties and working on my stacking plans. And then that builds my cold call list for the week.
My youngest son is Jordy. He alluded that I've been to the Lipsy School for a long time. What he was saying is, we've been doing Lipsy School or something similar to it for decades. When they were in elementary school, they were sitting in the classroom, and on weekends, one was always with me on tours. And of course, it's just interesting, they all three kind of ended up in the business because they knew nothing else to do. But that's how I would hang with the boys, was I need to look at property, and there would be times they would even be with me. But to say that I'm not passionate about the business would be an understatement, and I'm as excited about it today as I was 45 years ago. And when you have that kind of enthusiasm towards the business, it's a lot of fun. So that's just me. I know a lot of people would say, Mike, you really didn't have much of a life, and they don't mean it that way, but they are suggesting you should have had a little more, what's the word I'm looking for, diversity in how you approach it. But I did. I was single purpose. So I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I love it. I love it. By the way, my dad took me out too.
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean, I realized the other night I don't have the same opportunities now to involve my kids in what I do, because a lot of it involves travel. But I was driving somewhere with two of my kids on Friday, and I really didn't need to go where we were going. And I thought, why does this feel good to me? And I think, oh, that's right. Because I used to go with Dad on the weekends, and he would go look at properties and, kind of take notes, and I would be with him and, go on tours and things like that. And I thought, this is what feels like bonding with my kids.
Just so you know, especially for those of you that are fairly new to the business, your clients want to know you're jacked up. They want to know you're all in on this business, that you put in the time and the effort. I mean, they want to know that. They want to know that they've hired a bulldog, to represent them, whether they're selling. Who's tenor rep in here? Understand, they're hiring pit bulls. Let's make no mistake about why they hired tenor rep. You're going to face off with that landlord who could be an institution, who could be USAA or could be Vornado, and they want to know that you've got what it takes to get free rent and TI and moving allowance, and that doesn't come from someone who isn't a pipe hitter. You follow what I'm saying? Landlord rep, softer because you've got to manage the landlord, you've got to manage the tenant rep. There's a lot of people that are in that circus, right?
Yes, sir.
Investment sale tends to be a little bit more cerebral because there's complexity in the transactions. They all bring different things to the thing, but they all bring the passion. Regardless of what food group they're in, they all tend to bring the passion. I didn't mean to jump in.
No, it's okay, but it's an interesting side. Yes, John.
You know you're a real estate partner. You're like, I sold that and I bought that. And one time I leased that. So you will do that driving around with your kids. That's how you know you're indoctrinating them correctly. When you point out all the properties you worked on when you drive around town.
Yeah, teach them to play golf and go on the PGA Tour. You know, I mean, there's easier ways to make money. No, I mean, I love this business.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And only if it works for your schedule. If not, I'll find it tomorrow or the next day. I didn't get to the whiteboarding piece. So
Okay.
if you had a few minutes,
Yeah, I probably will.
and if not, then I just want
No, that's okay. Jordan, your question is really good. The biggest takeaway that I want to make sure everybody caught from what Mike said is the research is a non-primetime activity. That's my vernacular, but he said the hours. My vernacular is it's non-primetime. It doesn't mean it's not important. It just means that you got to put it in the right place. And I will tell you, I am less single purpose. I've been a trench dad, and I've done potty training and midnight feedings and all sorts of stuff. And, so the fact is I've been pulled in my life in a lot more different directions, and that's part of why, I've learned to survive and put things where I can put them so that I can have these other things. One thing that you should be clear about, especially when it comes to making calls, which I know we've really harped on that. There's obviously other things to the business, but you could have all the other things to the business, and if you can't prospect, then I don't need you. I mean, it's really rough to say, but the truth is that if I need somebody who's really good at financial modeling, Mike and I worked with a REIT a couple of years ago that hires kids out of the economic and finance department from Ivy League schools to run their numbers. They probably would never make a cold call, but they can run circles. They've forgotten more about math than I know. So I don't need you for that. If you're going to be a broker, there's lots of ways to be involved in the business, but if you want to be a broker, you got to produce. And cold calling is a momentum activity. So one of the reasons you do your research at a separate time is because once you start dialing, don't stop until you're done. If you break momentum, like Mike said, you're likely not to come back, and everything builds on itself. You know how to get over call reluctance? Mike gave you one, be prepared. It removes a lot of call reluctance. You could still be scared, but I'll tell you, that phone receiver, when you're first picking it up, I know we're wearing headsets nowadays, but metaphorically speaking, it's like that 150-pound dumbbell at the gym that you got to squat off the dumbbell rack, right? But if you keep lifting it, you're down, it becomes like the little jazzercise, the pink felt-covered dumbbell that's down at the other end. It gets easier, but not if you stop.
Just 2 minutes. I've been an author for a company called Nightingale Conan 30 years. Matter of fact, I still do royalties every 90 days. People go to, where are they coming? Not Amazon, it's Amazon. So if somebody put my stuff on Amazon podcast or whatever the hell they are, and so I get royalties every 90 days. Commercial real estate, how to buy, sell, and lease, negotiating to win, a bunch of different titles. They're audio tapes that have been converted. The founder of Nightingale Conan was Earl Nightingale, and his first book, which became an audio series, which was the first audio series to ever sell a million, was The Strangest Secret. And the strangest secret, if you listen to the whole 8 hours, the punchline is, what you think about most frequently is what you become. So the strangest secret, according to Earl Nightingale, and he's exactly right, is what you think about most frequently is what you become. The same thing is true when selling by phone and scheduling. And I do a very similar approach that Tim does. I would sit down with you, and I'd say, I want you to put in the calendar when you're going to have a commissioned event, whether it was a closing or a lease commission. Put it in. So, well, I have no idea. I said, I need you to get your 2023 calendar out and put in when you want active sales. Are y'all with me? I want one on the 15th of March, and it needs to be X dollars, and I want one in the summer. Who's with me so far? And you'd write down these dates, times, and amounts of fees that you were gonna generate in transactions 12 months into the future. Y'all with me? And y'all would see them every single day. And so now you got your first transaction in the pipeline, and you're working on it, and someone says, well, when do you wanna set the act of sale? Well, understand, you're the person in the center of the three-ring circus, title companies, appraisers, lenders, and when they said, and understand, you don't ever abdicate the date of when something closes. Not to the lawyer, not to the title company, not to the appraiser. Because in your calendar, what day did you have? What day? March 15th, right?
Yeah.
And so they say, well, I don't know if I get the title. Say, oh man, I've told everybody, you tell this to the title, I've told everybody it's closing March 15th. So understand, we selected you because we understand you can move heaven and earth to get this done. It's got to be March 15th, right? And so you're the one that's got to say, because you have it in your calendar. And if you truly believe in the strangest secret is what you think about most frequently is what becomes your reality, those events happen. One more, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim. I'm putting Jennifer on the spot. Let's say I need to pick up a couple more assignments in the Midwest. I'll go into my office and I'll yell to Jennifer, Jennifer, I need to go book 2 assignments in Kansas City. Well, that sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Because she doesn't even know who I'm going to call. I don't even know who I'm going to call. I do know this, though, that I do believe I've been thinking about booking 2 programs in Kansas City. I don't know if it's with Tim Schaefer. I don't know if it's with Colliers. I don't know if it's with JLL. I do know 1. 2 are going down. I mean, I don't know which 2 they are, but I know they're going down. And I got to make 6 calls, 7 calls, 8 calls to guess what?
Get them done.
I got 2 done. And it's got to be the same way when you're calling. You got to have the mindset. Mindset is key in selling by phone. You cannot go in tepid. You cannot go in with apprehension. You got to go in with resolve. You got to go in with, this is what is happening today. It's not what I hope happens. It's not what maybe could happen. This is, I'm not done until this happens. That's the only attitude you can possibly have, and it's mindset. You know, this is the results that I'm going to get from my activity. So what Tim is doing is laying it all out for you. There's got to be reality, but at some point in time, along with the right reality, you got to have mindset. You know, this is what I'm accomplishing when I hit the phones today. It's not, selling by phone is not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not, will it maybe happen? It's in your control. That's what's cool. And those brokers that have really come to that realization that it's in my control to make it happen, it becomes a reality.
And I would add to that you have to be consistent over time. I don't know if how many of you are familiar with a mathematical principle called the law of large numbers? Okay. If you're not, the easiest way and the way they teach it, even at the elementary school level, is flipping a coin. If I flip a coin, what are the odds that it's going to be heads or tails? 50%, okay? That's a provable mathematical reality. However, has anybody ever flipped a coin and gotten tails 4 times in a row? Ooh, tails is on a hot streak. No, it's not. It's the way the law of large numbers works is it states that the probabilities will always work out over a large data set. This is how casinos operate. Every casino, every game in a casino has a house advantage, ranging from, you know, 0.5% in blackjack to 5-10 in slots. And what it means is statistically in a casino in Vegas, it's not about you as an individual gambler. It's getting enough people to sit in the seat, and if I have to give you bottom shelf Merlot and cheap lemon drops to keep you in that seat for free, then I'm all about it. Because if statistically, if I can keep you there long enough, the house will always realize its advantage. Cold calling is the exact same. You could get your teeth kicked in for 3 days in a row and then go on a hot streak. The probabilities will always work out if you do it consistently over time. If you are stutter start, I made 100 calls, nothing happened, cold calling sucks, you know, and then 6 months later, I better make some more calls. You are not allowing the law of large numbers to work for you. You are relying on luck, and luck is not a strategy. But the purpose of this is to give yourself a pace. What is the standard to which you will hold yourself to accomplish these goals. If each one of you come Monday cannot specifically tell me, and I'm not going to be around to ask you, how many database additions, phone calls, properties do you need to drive this week, you have missed what it is to make goals over a 12-week period, a 90-day period, which, by the way, is how I play my game. Yes, I asked you to look at a year, so we have to look at a larger time scale, but I'm taking this in these little 90-day increments. What is the standard that I'm going to hold myself to? Get enough data to figure out whether it's working. We all want to have the answer, and it would be great if we did before we started playing the game, but sometimes you got to get out there and play it for a while. What statements are working? What open-ended questions are going better for you than others? What seems to be more interesting to people? One thing that, two more things on this topic, and then I think we'll have some time for whiteboarding. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but every goal has to have a strong why. And you need to poke at your whys sometimes because they don't all hold water. A colleague of mine came to me years ago. I wasn't his manager, it was just another agent in the office. And he took me out for coffee and he said, Rios, I want to be $1 million agent. I want to make $1 million net. Help me create a plan to get to $1 million net. And I said, I don't think you want to be $1 million agent. And he said, and he got offended. He was like, what, you don't think I'm smart enough? You don't think I'm capable enough? I mean, who's better apartment agent than me, in the office? I said, no. Don't misread me. It has nothing to do with your intelligence or even your skill level. But I said, let's talk about the reality. You love to roll in at the crack of 10:15 every morning. Okay. Takes, and are you really willing to make the trade-off? Because in this business, we can get really jaded about more all the time. But that's not everybody's goal. I know lots of people in this business that make a couple $100,000 a year and are happy as larks. I mean, that's cool, right? I know people who make 7 figures and never have money because they spend it as fast as they make it. My dad was a pretty good broker and he spent it faster than he could make it. Happiness and success, you get to decide. You get to define what that means for you. But once you do that, then you got to have something you can measure, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Floors and ceilings. When I was 19 years old, I had a coach that taught me, he said, Tim, the problem with goals is they not only become a floor, but they become a ceiling. And so if I say, all right, for the next 12 weeks, I need to average 50 outbound calls a week in order for me to close this gap on the BD side. You can't straight line that all the time. There's going to be weeks where you can maybe make 10 with everything you've got going on. But the mistake people make is they go, oh man, this week was so busy, I didn't have any time, I barely got 5 phone calls out. Next week, I hit my 50, Tim. Okay, but what about the 45 you missed last week? So you have to see the flexibility in there that this is a target. And when you can give more, you need to give more, because inevitably there will be times when you have to give less for factors beyond your control. So think about floors and ceilings. One last concept. This is where Mike makes fun of me because he thinks I'm so philosophical. And I am. He's the plumber. I don't know. I was going to say Socrates, but that sounded really too self-aggrandizing. So structurally in your brain, you have 3 basic components. Obviously, the brain is very complex, and so this is a simplification. But down near your brain stem is what's sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain or the reptilian complex. This is instinct. It is fight or flight, the most basic kind of responses. When you expand out from that, you get to the paleo-mammalian, or what we sometimes refer to as the mammalian brain. The reason we call it this is because this is the place of habit and routine. As you go through life and you have experiences that either produce negative or positive results, your brain, the neural path between your neocortex, this human part here in front, and what we think of as the human brain, writes that into your limbic brain or your mammalian brain that says, when we do X, we get Y, and Y is pleasurable. So habit gets written, think of it like hard coding, into your limbic system. The human brain is the neocortex, and it's got all, your parietal and occipital lobes and, your neocortex and all that kind of, your prefrontal cortex. Very, very complex. This is where at least all of your conscious thought is happening. There's lots of things that happen there, but when you are ingraining a new habit, it is an activity of the neocortex. And what you have to recognize, there's a neuroscientist out of Stanford named Andrew Huberman who's done fantastic work in this particular field of what we call limbic friction. And limbic friction, how many of you have decided you're going to undertake a new exercise program? You're going to go to the gym, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you're getting ready to go, and at 4:45, you are so tired, you can't imagine going to the gym. I'm seeing some uncomfortable smiles out there. I think it's happened to some of you. That is limbic friction. Because your mammalian brain, where your habits say, oh, no. It's going to be much more comfortable if you go home and crack open a beer and get in the lazy boy, because that produces pleasurable results. And so the limbic system is trying to pull you back into habit. Okay? It's why you get to dinner time and you're on the new diet and you think, I really didn't eat a lot today and I'm pretty hungry, and a little deviation here and there isn't going to matter. It's because you got that limbic brain saying, dude, you don't want the salad with the low-fat vinaigrette. You want the double bacon cheeseburger. Once you're aware of this push-pull between your neocortex and your limbic brain, it's easier to maybe easy isn't the right word. It's much more straightforward, because you can be on that cusp of making those phone calls and you think, my desk is a mess. I cannot make cold calls under these circumstances at all. I must organize my desk before I make a cold call. Caroline, are you okay? You okay? All right. By the way, I wrote the book on that one, okay? That's where you got to stop and you got to say, I know what that is. It's limbic friction. The brain wants to be comfortable. It wants to stick with the habits. It's trying to pull me in. But my neocortex, my human brain, is going to decide. So recognize that those things you're feeling are usually false signals, because that is how your brain is wired. And you can rewire it, is the good news. One thing that I want all of you to commit, whatever you have on your paper right now for your activity levels, your earnings, your gap, whatever, don't keep it to yourself. You need to share it with somebody. Somebody's got to know what you're trying to do. I have so many wonderful clients, and they say, Tim, one of my favorite things about working with you is, this guy said this to me, 27-year veteran. He says to me the other day, dude, I was having a terrible week, and I thought, I won't even be able to look at you on Friday if I haven't made any calls. So on Thursday, I set aside 2 hours and I made calls, right? I'd love to tell you that I always did what I was supposed to do as an agent because it was the right thing to do, but sometimes I did it because I had to go in for an activity review, and I knew the manager would kill me if I didn't have, I worked at a place that was pretty serious about numbers. And I knew I was going to get in trouble. So I did it sometimes because of public shame. So don't underestimate. We're another group of new agents that I worked with. We had a thing where everybody set their own goals. And if you didn't make the mark you set for yourself, you had to buy there's 4 of us. You had to buy everybody else a sandwich for lunch, which at that point in our careers and with what all of us were making, might as well have been dinner at Ruth's Chris. Okay, but we put some teeth into it. But if you start the diet on Monday and don't tell anybody, then nobody knows that being at the buffet at noon is not a good thing. Okay? All right. Mike, let's do some whiteboarding.
All right, 15 minutes, I'm gonna give you the black box. Let me have the microphone, please.
I have one quick question on both of them.
Yeah.
So how do you, in the middle of training, like junior brokers here, and with a lot of younger brokers, I see kind of the same issue. It's great to be persistent and pound
Get a
the
Word
phones and
document.
call a ton of people, but they kind of get this tunnel vision sort of thing, where they call someone, they have an objective, they know what they want from the call, but they have the tunnel vision and it's kind of black and white. Obviously, that's not always the situation. For example, I was explaining this to him, franchisee I've done a number of deals with, called 3 times over the past 3 quarters. First time I called them, hey, are you looking to expand? They said no. I said, is there anyone that you've worked with recently? They said, oh, I had trained another franchisee. I'll give you their contact. That led to an opportunity. Quarter later, called again, hey, are you looking to expand? No. Well, what's new about your business? Oh, I have one landlord who won't fix the roof and it's leaking. I think he's trying to sell the building. Talked to that landlord, that led to a listing. A quarter later, called him again, similar, corporate relocating my territory for my franchisee. Talked to corporate, they're doing that because they had an incoming franchisee. So even though all 3 times I called the same person, they said, no, Alec, we're not expanding, we're not doing business. Because there wasn't kind of that tunnel vision, which I think a lot of times younger, newer brokers get.
They do.
When they're on the phone. They miss the expanded opportunity out there.
Well, it's like Mike said, and you just got to remember this. Are you calling to develop a relationship or are you calling looking for a transaction? The clients will know the difference. So call for the relationship.
All right, let's go. So we did Runs Clear, correct? And what was the purpose of Runs Clear? To qualify, to determine. And the question I get all the time is, Mike, when do you not work with the client? What number? Everybody wants the number. If it was 2008, first part of 2009, I'd work with a 9 because I had nothing going on. I mean, there weren't a lot of people that want training consulting, when Lehman Brothers went broke, right? Up until about 60 days ago, I probably would make sure they were at least 3s in every single category and had a total of at least 35. My multifamily brokers have told me within the last 6 weeks, their world has changed. Interest rates have risen dramatically, cap rates have changed. All of a sudden, the volume of BOVs that they were doing, and some of my teams were doing a BOV a day, right? They said that's not happening any longer. So the world has changed, and so maybe 35s now becomes a 28. And it's different depending upon how busy you are. The busier you are, the higher the number's got to be. But if I have a client that gives me a high score in the needs analysis, I then go to my black box, which is whiteboarding. Jennifer, Tim, and I had 3 calls that ended up being 3 wonderful assignments. One first came in from 7-Eleven. The guy that became our point of contact worked closely with the director of real estate, Ian Williams, and he, not Ian, but the guy that was like the number 2 or number 3 at 7-Eleven, had been in Cushman Wakefield. He knew me. He says, Mike, I can get you in the mix along with other firms. And we want a proposal for you for doing some training and consulting for all the real estate executives at 7-Eleven. This was a monster assignment. And I said, man, there's so much I could put in my proposal. I need to do a whiteboarding session. And he says, well, what's a whiteboarding session? Well, I'll get you and your key stakeholders along with Ian, and we'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then we'll be able to generate a proposal. So far, so good. A couple months later, I get a call from Realterm, the largest REIT that does on-airport development. They do the catering things, they do the UPS properties, and they're on-airport, off-airport. They said, Mike, we're interviewing several firms. We know who you are. You're in the mix. We want a proposal. I said, man, I have no idea what to put in a proposal. I need to do a whiteboarding session. What's a whiteboarding session? It's nothing more than you'll get a couple of stakeholders together. I'll do a go-to meeting or a Zoom or a Teams. I'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then we'll be able to generate the proposal. You all with me so far? This is my standard operating procedures. You're going to finally get the idea. I get a call from the State Department. This wasn't the U.S. State Department. This was everything but the United States. They did the embassies, they did the Marine Corps housing, they did the embassies themselves, they did the consulates. These were the real estate practitioners outside of the United States doing everything that you can imagine that was related to an embassy. You got it? Mike, we want a 2-day negotiating program. We're interviewing you and some of your competitors. I said, we need to do a whiteboarding session. They said, what's a whiteboarding session? It's nothing more than we'll have a whiteboard, we'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then we'll get your proposal. By the by, how many of those proposals did we get? All 3 of them. My black box, what do I want to say? I'm looking for some magic here. My secret sauce. That's it. Thank you. My secret sauce is the whiteboard. It has helped me win more assignments. I can't tell you how often I'm hired by tenant rep brokers, investment brokers, Danny Baker in Dallas, Texas, Tyler Anderson in Phoenix, Arizona. The list goes on and on and on and on, that they were going after a monster assignment, help us win it. And I said, the win begins when we do a whiteboarding session with the client, because we're going to out needs analysis or out discover your competitor. So I want you all to experience a whiteboarding session, because if you get a person that has a good, solid score and runs clear, you say, where do I go next? We don't want you going to the proposal or the listing presentation next. We want a next step is the whiteboard. Then you do the proposal or presentation. Now listen carefully. The whiteboarding session is combination theatrics and legitimate needs analysis. But it's an activity that you're doing that no one else is doing. That's one of the reasons they're thinking, why didn't the competitor do this? This is important. So Jennifer, who's done, 1,000 whiteboards with me over the years, I'm going to let y'all be the client. I'm going to be the broker. But I'm going to let you be the kind of client you want. So do you want to be a seller of investment property, a landlord of a property that needs leasing, or do you want to be a tenant that needs a new space or renewal? You got to pick one of the 3. Which one is it?
Tenant that needs new space.
The tenant needs new space. All right. I do runs clear. I get you on the phone, and I said, well, how much space you got? You said, well, we need about 20,000 square feet. Well, that's what I've got here, and we'd like to do a 10-year lease. And I'd say, whoa. And they'd say, Mike, we've talked to a couple of other brokers. We'd like a proposal to represent from you. I said, whoa. I wouldn't even know what to put in there. And just so you know, of the tenant rep, investment sale, landlord rep, the tenant rep needs a whiteboard more than any of them, because there's so much that they could need. Right? You know, investment sale, we want to sell it. When's the best time to go to the market? Where are you going to price it? That kind of thing. Tenant rep's a whole different thing. So I'd say, listen, we need to do a whiteboarding session. They said, what the heck's that? I said, that's nothing more than you and anyone that's on the committee or any of your key stakeholders will get together in your office, and it shouldn't take more than 15, 20 minutes. And I do want to do a deep dive on what's important to you, and then we'll come back with a proposal on how we would represent you. They said, that sounds like a reasonable thing to do. Now watch carefully. If only 1 or 2 people are in town and 1 or 2 of the other stakeholders who will be coming to town are in another city, I come to your office and set up a Zoom meeting or a go-to meeting, and so you'll see what we're talking about on the whiteboard in your conference room, but then we'll send a whiteboard link to the other clients in Houston or Dallas, wherever they might be, so they can see what's going on also. The vast majority of whiteboarding sessions that we did with 7-Eleven, State Department, and Real Term, they were all done. Nobody was in my office, and I didn't go to Annapolis, Maryland. I didn't go to Dallas, Texas. I didn't go to Washington, D.C. We did it virtually. So many of the whiteboarding, most of the whiteboarding sessions you'll do will be done in your city, right? For years, I used to actually go in with a flip chart, you know, with the sticky stuff on the back. You know what? You've seen those before, and we'll show you some tomorrow or the next day. And I used to, in my horrible handwriting and terrible spelling, would write down what they told me they wanted me to cover. So now we do it this way because Jennifer is so gifted at getting it done. So I'm going to ask the questions. Now remember, did I get a runs clear high score to go to this next step? Yes. If I got a low score, what did I do?
Throw them away.
Well, I didn't throw them away, but I'll follow up with you in maybe 3 to 6 months, right? So this is person high score, lease expiring in 18 to 24 months, 20,000 square feet. Tim was right on when he said today with build out and all that stuff, it could take months and months and months. Start with the soft questions. You wouldn't start off with, would you like a lease term of 10 years? That's a closed probe too tight. You start soft. Let me give you an example. And I want y'all to give me answers. Imagine you're the tenant and you're on the committee. You know, we would look forward to representing you, but we really want to understand what's important to you, your colleagues, and your clients. share with me anything and everything that you think that would be important that would be in our presentation or our proposal, all right? So just kind of just throw them out, and Jennifer's going to capture them, but just kind of tell me what's important to you on an upcoming relocation or on a renewal. Just anything. What might it be?
Gonna need some tenant improvement dollars for our fit out.
All right, so you'll need TI dollars.
Abated rent.
You need abated or free rent. And then what else is important to you?
Amenities,
So parking is important to you.
2-story.
Now watch carefully. So parking, and then who said amenities? Now on amenities, that's something I'm going to drill down on. No selling is permitted. Because the temptation is you get one of these things, that's what you want to do. You want to go off on a tear. This is needs analysis. But by asking the questions, you subtly are selling, aren't you? And let me ask you a question. Are there any amenities that you can think of that would really be important to you?
Fitness center.
So fitness center, what else would be important to you? And y'all others can say, you know,
Break room.
say again?
Break room.
So a break room, is that a shared conference facility? Is that one and the same or something separate?
I'd say that's separate.
So is a conference center also something that would be important?
We would need a conference room too.
But not for the office, but in the office building.
Correct.
And then you said a shared, what was that you said?
Like a break room?
Like a break, I want to describe that to me, a break room. What is that?
Kitchen area for coffee.
In your space or outside the space?
Well, it would be in the building, within the 20,000 square feet.
Oh, in the space. I got you. Okay, okay. And then what else what's important to you? What else?
Is there an acreage in it?
Do you want an anchor tenant?
Well, I mean, if I'm depending on what kind of chain or what kind of company I am.
I think the exercise here is office,
Do they
just for
want a
fun.
standalone
So
building?
it's office. What?
A standalone building,
So you think that maybe a standalone building might be an opportunity?
like a standalone building.
You want a standalone building?
Yes.
All right. Now you have to make the decision, because you don't want to go too close probe too soon, but anytime somebody says standalone, we have the best lease first owned guy on the planet sitting right over here, which you're not doing this Lipsy School, are you? But it's earlier. Now you got to ask the question, have y'all given consideration not leasing but owning?
We've tossed it around, but we haven't made a decision on it yet.
Is that something you'd like for us to address when we come back and present?
We'll look at it.
Well, listen, we're customizing this presentation for you. We don't want to add anything that you don't think is appropriate. So, my question is that something the committee might entertain? Is how do we make the decision? Should we be leasing or should we be owning?
Well, we'd have to look at the numbers, and if it makes sense. we
Well,
can come back.
perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so it at least should be an agenda item.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. What else is important to you?
Location of restaurants, like if what am I nearby, certain.
Interesting. So you say restaurants, but let me ask you, for your staff, is like daycare something that's also important? So in addition to daycare and restaurants, anything else that would be a support facility, maybe not in the property, that would also be important?
Grocery stores,
Interesting. So other services like FedEx or UPS things. That's okay. Good.
Location to your employees.
Say again.
Location to your employees.
Yeah. Now this is interesting. So when you think about location to your employees, you also think about employees, principals, and customers. We have a capability, and I only want to introduce it if it's important to you, called the scattergram, where we identify properties that might work for you relative to where you and your employees live and where your customers come from. Is that something that you would want to see included in our presentation?
Yes.
Now listen very carefully. I'm not selling our scattergram capability, but I have just now planted we had what capability? What got planted? Scattergram, that's an interesting kind of tool that they can talk about where our employees and principals live, where our customers are, and where the buildings are. So that's stepping outside the role play. What else would be important to you? Huh? I'm sorry, say again? Public transportation. And talk to me about proximity. I mean, really close or within a reasonable walking distance? Okay, so reasonable. And reasonable is defined by you as being what?
2 to 3 blocks.
Okay, good. What else would be important to you? Now, I go with that as long as I can, and then I go with real tight closed probes. A closed probe would be, give me an example, Tim, of a good tight closed probe that you would ask a Tim.
Corporate park.
Say again? Oh, yeah.
Would you like to be in a corporate park or
doesn't matter.
Would you want to be in a corporate park, or
Relatively
you want to be, yeah, so, you know, those kinds, so they're questions that are specific. And they're the kinds of questions you would be tempted to ask at the very beginning. So the mistake that most make in whiteboarding sessions is ask tight questions too soon. Get it all flushed out, and then you go tight. So now we've got this list. Ideally, you want to try to get as many as you possibly can on one page. And the reason is you don't want to toggle back and forth, particularly if it's a Zoom call. Because what I'm going to do is say, listen, we really appreciate the time. This is really helpful, but what I'd like for you to do before we leave is take a look at this list and tell me, in order of priority, the items that are most important to you. And I'm going to let y'all kind of discuss this among the committee, but take a look at this. TI, let me see the whole list, Jennifer. Free rent, parking, lease first. So if talk, just, and I love the discussion among the committee members. I don't want to direct it. I don't want to insert myself. I want them to discuss it, because you know what? More than likely, they've never been facilitated this way as a committee. And two, they've never had the lively discussion among themselves from this list. You got it?
And they're collectively.
Oh, baby, yeah, I'm loving it. Because they're talking, you know what, leasing, even with interest rates, you know, we got a bunch of capital. And so now so now y'all have had the discussion, and someone give me, Mike, this no doubt about it's number one for us. Look at the list, what would that be? What's number one? Come on. TI. And so let's say the consensus among the committee is TI. Now watch carefully as the facilitator. They're more than welcome to have two number ones. If, let's say, there's two stakeholders or two people with authority, one's a CFO and one's a COO, and one feels strongly about this one and one's strongly, guess what you do? Make them both ones. We'll make them both ones. You don't have to have just one. And you can also put things in a basket where you can have 2 or 3 items that all fall within basket one. So far, so good?
Like TI and free loan,
Those are concessions. Yeah. And that might fall in the basket of concessions, right? You're exactly right. So, and so what would y'all think would be number 2 as you look at this list?
Parking is.
Parking over here. What else is, are we in agreement? What's that?
Location to employees.
Interesting. So we now have 2 number 2s. One would be parking, and one would be a proximity to employees and principals and customers. Which would y'all agree would be number 2 of those 2?
I'd probably say parking. Well, actually, I didn't want to detract from your question. Go ahead.
Well, what I need to get a sort of a consensus on number 2. What would that be?
I think parking is very important. I would say parking.
All right. So is the consensus? It sounds like the consensus might be. So can we do this? We'll make parking 2, and can we make location, proximity to employees and staff number 3? Does that work for you all? All right. And then let's get number 4. What would number 4 be?
Parking a standalone building can be in a bucket also, because parking probably constitutes as going to be a standalone building. It's probably more space.
Well, we've got parking as number 2, and so now this is the guy I went out on a tangent with that. I didn't understand the question.
You said you need a standalone building. It's probably going to have more space for parking. I was just saying you could put it in a bucket because you said 2.
Well, but no one's put it in the top 3 a standalone building though.
Totally act like you didn't hear what I just said.
I did. But if this is the CFO, then guess what you got to do? You got to understand what they're saying. All right. So what's number 4? Amenities. Can we agree that amenities would be number 4? Mm-hmm. All right. So let's put in amenities number 5 and number 4, and then number 5. A location to restaurants, daycare.
Standalone building. I mean, restaurants are going to be. There's going to be restaurants. I mean, how many restaurants do you need?
I think lease or own should be.
Lease or own, and standalone.
Well, let me ask you this: lease or own? You want that as number 4?
Yeah, I would.
Do you have consensus there?
I'd say yeah.
All right. So lease or own is 4. So amenities, you want to make that number 5? And just so you know, this is really what happens in a whiteboarding session, because you're trying to get consensus, but you kind of be herding these people, right? They've never done this before. So now make amenities number 5. Now let's just say it went the full 25 minutes, and I just want to give you the short version. They've never experienced this before. They've never been facilitated. Now understand, tenant representation, you are a consultant that also happen to be a very good negotiator. That's what you are. And if you don't do this, and I'm going to do a deep dive on 3 things tomorrow morning: win more tenant rep assignments, win more listings for lease, and win more investment sales. So I'm going to give you the coolest best practices most of you have never seen before to get those 3 assignments. But this comes before you talking about your best practices. This has got to be done on any type of tenant rep assignment, investment sale. So now I look at this and I say, before I go, is there anything you would like to change on this? Now let me tell you what we do. Jennifer takes this whiteboarding session and she cleans it up. She puts our logo on there, on their logo, and then and leave the numbers on for right now, but the numbers disappear. Y'all never see those numbers again. And then we send you the whiteboarding that's been sanitized, and we say, we really appreciate the valuable time. This has given us clear direction on what we need to cover when we come in and make our presentation next week. If there's anyone that did not attend that will be in attendance in the presentation, please have them, let's look at this list and add any iphones. So the CEO was too busy to attend. And she gets this list and she says, what is this? Oh, the Lipsy group came in and they're tenant rep brokers and they came in and did this analysis. Well, where's the one from the other brokers? Well, no, they were the only firm that did it. Well, that's weird. Only one firm came in to do a deep dive on what we needed? That is really kind of weird. Were you all surprised there was only one firm that did? Oh, well, let me tell you what. Add on the list, I don't want to be disrupted when we move. So how do you do a relocation without disrupting our business? Put that on the list. So you add on the list, no disruption, and it comes back to me. They never see the numbers again. Now it's time to organize my presentation, right? We're going to develop a client-centric presentation. We're not going to have a table of contents. We're going to have a client-centric statement. And you know what we're going to discuss? We're going to discuss 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. That is going to be the order of my tenant rep presentation. I'm going to start off talking about access to public transportation, transition to locations, employees, principals, and customers. From there, 2, 3, I'm going to go, should we lease our own? 5, I'm going to talk about amenities. And then guess what I'm finishing on in my tenant rep presentation? That's where you close. You trial close on number 1. But most of you do not know what number 1 is because you did runs clear or some form of that. And so you never did the deep dive. And now you inadvertently put the most important items first. And now your presentation loses all of its thrust because now you get to the weaker, less important items. You must organize a presentation with the second most important item first. It's important. And then you get to and sandwich 3, 4, 5 in between. And now you got 10 or 15 minutes left. What are you on? The most important. If you're going to trial close, you trial close coming off of 1, not 3, 4, or 5. And then you're going to see on Friday when I get into presentations, then the body of the presentation is organized 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. And oh, by the by, what is the last slide in my slide deck? It's a way forward slide. How do you think it's organized? 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. We're confident that our team has covered the 5 most important items that you wanted us to stress today. We started off talking about parking and access to public transportation. And see what I'm saying? And then I go 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, then I finish up because we've been so thorough, we've covered what was most important to you. Wouldn't you agree that we should represent you beginning on the 1st of July? That's how you make a tenant rep presentation, our investment sale. And that's why we do whiteboarding sessions. And it is our special sauce. Because every time that someone says, Mike, we want a proposal, but we're looking at others, how many times do we get that? But we're talking to others. We're talking to others. I said, we got to go to a whiteboarding session. What's that? And I tell them, I said, yeah, we'll do that. Guess what I know? What do I know before I've even made the proposal?
Nobody else is doing that.
No one else is doing it, and I'm going to win the assignment. And 50% of the time, guess what I never have to do? Give them a proposal. Because they were so impressed with the whiteboarding session, we win the business there. We won the business. You know where you win the business? In the needs analysis. That's where you want to win the assignment, not in the proposal.
What's your needs analysis?
This is the deep dive. Runs Clear was just getting the vibe they are motivated and I want to pursue. That's the reason. That's not the needs analysis. It's just.
You know you're going to have competition, so this is
My separate.
bringing it down to you.
This is where I get the separation.
Yeah.
You don't get.
It shows you care about what they want. And you let them drive the train.
You don't want to win the assignment at the proposal stage. That's too late.
Yeah.
That's too risky. You better start winning the assignment way ahead of that.
And then you find out that the CEO said that
We'd only take a standalone building if we do a purchase, and the 2-story, we can occupy a 20-story. We can go into a 20-story building as long as we get 2 floors. Or we can take 1 floor. These things get brought out in the wash.
So we're pitching 7-Eleven, and we knew that the president of 7-Eleven, not Ian, but his boss, had a close friend who was in the training business in Dallas, right? So Ian Williams, the director of real estate, who was a lovely, lovely guy to work with, after we did the whiteboarding session, the word he used was wicked. He said, that was wicked smart. He said, that was just awesome. Because it was the first time that someone facilitated a discussion with his fellow stakeholders on what should be in the training. But in your world, what should be in your tenant rep services. Because the mistake you're going to make is if you don't do this, you're going to make an off-the-shelf tenant rep presentation on here's what we do. And it might not be the things that they're looking for. And the only way you know what they're looking for is by asking the stakeholders. All right, so I've gone a little over, which I apologize. Tomorrow morning when you show up, just so you know, life is going to be different for you come noon. You won't be the same, so I want to give you the heads up. We're going to deep dive in 3 areas: tenant rep, landlord rep agency, and capital markets investment sales. We're going to give you the best practices which will dramatically improve your win rate and better serve your client. That's what's happening tomorrow morning. Then a dear friend of mine who I taught, I forgot how many CCIM courses, Rod Knowles, is going to do how to prosper in the secondary market. And secondary market can be anything less than 400,000, which is most markets. But I have a lot of people saying, oh, Mike, those stuff that you do is assuming I'm in Chicago. Not tomorrow when Rod comes out. And then the last thing we're going to do, which we have never done at Ellipsis School before, we're going to spend an hour on, what do you want to call it, Tim? Not financial planning.
Yeah, financial health for commercial.
But how much should you set aside if there's a down market? We've never done anything, so we're excited about that. Big, big day tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. Any questions of us before we send you packing until you have a nice evening? We got a big day tomorrow, good day today. Anything else, Jennifer, we need to tell them? We start up again tomorrow at 8:30. You do need to take your stuff because sometimes this classroom is used in the evening. So, but during lunch you can leave it. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Y'all were fantastic. Thank you. Okay. All right, guys. What? No. I don't need one more whiteboard session saved on my laptop. Thank you, Miss Jennifer.